Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the world's biggest bookstore. This evening, we are happy to have with us one of the foremost writers in fantasy fiction, Mr. George R.R. Martin. Okay. Before he speaks, I will tell you the rules for the event. First of all, he will be signing 3 books at a time. So if you have more than 3 books, what happens is you have to go to the back of the line, okay? He will be talking, and then after that, he will be talking about his book, and then after that, he will take questions, and then after that one will be the signing. Pictures are allowed to be taken. We do have a designated photographer here at the front of the store. She will be here taking your cameras, and she will take your pictures as he is signing the book and you are meeting Mr. Martin. And with all that, we're pleased to have with us, as I said, George R.R. Martin. He's written 10 short story collections, 9 novels, including the book he's promoting today, and started the epic 7-book series, Song of Ice and Fire. This author did a signing here a few years ago, actually 2003, and the turnout here was great. Tonight he's here to promote the 4th book of the series called A Feast for Crows, which became a bestseller almost immediately after its release. Ladies and gentlemen, he came all the way from Santa Fe, New Mexico. Please give a big Toronto welcome to George R.R. Martin.
Well, thank you all, and thank you all for coming out tonight. Nice to see so many people. Actually, I've been to Toronto a few times. I was here, in addition to 2003, I was here in 2000, 5 years ago, another lifetime ago, when A Storm of Swords came out. I did a promotional appearance for that book here as well. And I had a very strange experience that time, sort of a science fictional experience where I slipped through into an alternate universe because it was in November, early November of the year 2000 that I was here. And there was this election happening in America at the time, and I voted by absentee ballot. And I was in Toronto and I did my signing. I think I was at a different bookstore at that time. Maybe that was the problem, I don't know. But I did my signing, and I had a nice time. I met some friends. I went out to a late dinner. I got back to my hotel around 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock at night after the dinner. And I watched the election returns coming in for a while, just right up to the point where Al Gore won Florida. And then I thought it was safe to go to sleep. And sometime while I slept, I slipped over into an alternate universe, and I've been stuck in it ever since, in this horrible universe where George Bush is President of the United States. So I'm hoping that when I go to sleep tonight in my hotel, I may slip back, since Toronto is where the door is, and I will wake up and Al Gore, President Gore, will be in the middle of his 2nd term, I hope. But we shall see. I don't know. It's a strange space-time portal you have here in Toronto. It does startle me to realize that it's been 5 years, and that's probably the thing I should talk about first, is why has it been 5 years? Because that's always the first question I get asked when I do these interviews. Certainly it was not my intention to take 5 years with these books. They are big books. They take a long time to write. Even if everything goes very well, I'm talking about a year and a half, 2 years to finish one of these under normal circumstances. But I did not have normal circumstances with this 4th book of the series. I ran into some challenges along the way, particularly at the beginning and the end of the writing process. Those of you who have been here at my event in the year 2000, or any of my events in 2000 and 2001, may have recalled me talking about my plans for the fourth book in the series at that time. At that time, the fourth book was called A Dance with Dragons. And having just finished A Feast for Crows, my plan was to skip forward in time 5 years, oddly enough, odd figure, 5 years in time from the end of that book. And this was the famous 5-year gap that I gave numerous interviews about. The idea was to allow some of the children to grow up a little, allow the dragons to get a bit older. I was going to skip forward 5 years, pick up the action, and it was a terrific plan, at least in theory, when I was talking about it on platforms like this and in interviews with journalists. But then I actually went home and I set out to do it, and that wasn't nearly as easy. What I discovered was that while it did work well for some of the younger characters, who were basically in a situation where they were learning things or being educated, it did not work at all well for the adult characters who were in the middle of the action. So I was writing scenes like with Jon Snow on the wall, where he was sitting around saying, "It's been a quiet 5 years." Boy, it was a lot of stuff 5 years ago, but nothing much has happened since. But gosh, now things are getting ominous again, so I think bad stuff is going to happen now. So that didn't work, needless to say. Alternatively, I was writing chapters with Cersei and some of the people in King's Landing, where they were reflecting, oh, what a tumultuous 5 years it's been. You know, there was this rebellion, and then this other thing happened, and High Septon died, and we had this crisis, and she's thinking about all this in flashbacks, and I was writing these endless, stupid flashback scenes. But because I had been so forthcoming in all of my events and speeches about the 5-year gap, I was reluctant to abandon it, because after all, I don't like to mislead my readers and fans. So I should be more careful about opening my big mouth on some of these occasions. And I actually beat my head against the wall for most of a year with the famous 5-year gap before I finally decided, you know, this is a really bad idea. I don't know why I ever thought it was a good idea. So I threw out the 5-year gap. And if any of you have just returned and haven't read my website and don't know this, you won't find a 5-year gap in A Feast for Crows. In fact, you won't find a 5-day gap, a 5-minute gap. It actually starts before the end of A Storm of Swords, so the two books partially overlap. So that was the crisis I had at the beginning of writing the book. Then I ran into another crisis at the end of writing the book that also delayed it. A Storm of Swords, the third book in the series, was a gigantic book. All of these books are big. And that's not happenstance, they're designed to be big. Fantasy fans like big books, and I wanted to tell a big story. When I first started writing this many, many years ago, what seems decades ago now, I was just coming off my 10 years in Hollywood. And while I enjoyed my time in Hollywood, you know, there's a certain limitations on what you can do in Hollywood, particularly back when I was working there in the 80s and early 90s, when computer technology wasn't as advanced as it is now. If you write a scene with 1,000 people in it, you have to hire 1,000 extras. If you write a lot of sets, you couldn't create them on computer back then. You actually had to build them. My scripts were always too big and too expensive. So I went through 10 years of people saying, "This is a great script, George, but please, you know, cut it down, eliminate 50 characters and format paintings, and get it down to 3 locations and 12 people, because that's all we can afford to hire. And also, by the way, it's too long, so please cut 14 pages out of it." So I'm going through looking for, you know, a place where I can cut a line or a speech, and I did. I mean, that was the job. I did the job. I was pretty good at the job. But I didn't necessarily like doing it. And later, I would get the opportunity to publish some of my scripts, and I almost always published the first draft, which was too long and too expensive. It was not usually as polished as some of the later drafts, but it was usually richer and had more good stuff in it, I thought. So needless to say, after a decade of that, I really wanted to do something big, something with a cast of thousands, something epic in scale, where I could have as many battles and scenes and locations and characters as I wanted, without having to worry about the budget or the time schedule or anything like that. And I set out to do that with Ice and Fire, and I think I've amply succeeded there. But the books were long right from the start. The first book was 1,100 pages in manuscript, near enough. Clash of Kings was about 1,200 pages in manuscript. And Storm of Swords hit about 1,500 pages in manuscript. 1,550, actually, about. And that is just about at the limit of being publishable. Much longer than that, and the book actually starts to fall apart, particularly in paperback. It's problems with binding it. You know, the glue won't hold that many pages. The spine tends to crack when it's that big. Not to mention elderly people having their wrists break from trying to hold it up in the bathtub. It's very sad. So my publisher made it clear, okay, Storm of Swords is very long. This has got to be the limit. The next one can't get even longer than this. Make it shorter. And I said, confidently, my big mouth again, I said, yes, no problem. The next book will be about the length of Clash with Kings, about 1,200 pages in manuscript. Why I say these things, I don't know, but I do. Needless to say, I passed, like a year and a half ago, I passed 1,200 pages and the book wasn't nearly done. And then I passed 1,300 pages and the book wasn't nearly done. 1,400 pages came and went. 1,500 pages, I'm sweating now, and the book still isn't nearly done. And finally, I exceeded the length of A Storm of Swords. At which point, I called up my editors and publishers and said, okay, we got a problem now. The book it's longer than A Storm of Swords, and I still got hundreds more pages to write because some of these things aren't done. I mean, really, is this the limit of Storm of Swords? Come on, you can go a little longer, can't they? And they said, well, okay, 100 pages longer. You can have another 100 pages, but after that, really, no, we can't. It's too big. We can't publish it. So relieved, I said, okay, great. I'll wrap it up in 100 pages, and I went back to work on it. And I filled up those 100 pages, and the book still wasn't nearly done. So at that point, we had the real crisis of what I was going to do with this book. And really, there were only two solutions to it. One was to cut the book very drastically. And I don't mean there by cutting out an occasional line of dialogue or scratching out an adjective or two. It would have meant taking out entire plot lines, storylines, taking out entire characters. I was reluctant to do that. I thought it would make it a lesser book. I mean, the storylines that were in there were put in there for a reason. I'd always intended to expand to some of these storylines, and now I'd gotten to them. And yes, the book was big, but I didn't think it would be a better book with these cuts made. So then the other choice is to cut the book in half, and that's what we looked at initially. Was simply, I had about 1,600 pages in manuscript at that point. We could have cut it right in half, kind of in the middle, about page 800. And it would have been Feast for Crows Part 1, and then I would have tried to finish, because I still wasn't done, remember. I would try to finish the undone parts, and then A Feast for Crows Part 2 would have come out. And we were going to do that for about a week. I was consulting with my editors in both the UK and the US and looking at that. And I kept looking around page 800, and you know, there was no really good place to cut it around page 800 to break this book. Now, A Song of Ice and Fire is one story. There's many stories, but it's also one story. But within the context of the larger story, I do make an effort to make each of these books be, let us say, a movement in a symphony. Each of these books to stand by itself to a certain extent, to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. Yes, the end is never completely the end, except for the characters who die, but it's sort of an end. It's like the phase of the struggle is over. The characters undergone a transition in the last chapter, passing from this part of their life to that part of their life. Maybe it's a coming of age thing, or acceptance of something, or a change of allegiance, whatever it is. I tried to do that, and if I'd cut it around page 800, none of that would have happened. I mean, there was no cliffhangers there was no resolutions of anything. It would have been just, okay, here are 800 pages. I didn't want to do that either. But fortunately, I had precedent, and because this had come up with one of the Wildcard books years ago, and it was actually my friend, brilliant young fantasy writer named Daniel Abraham, who suggested this to me, and when he did, I slapped my forehead, because I should have seen it myself, that the best way to divide the book was not by cutting it in half in the middle, but since it is a book made up of many threads, many characters woven together, to undo that weave and to separate them. So that's what I did with Feast for Crows. We didn't cut the 1,600 pages in half at page 800. I took 1,100 of them, involving certain characters, most of the action around King's Landing, and that's what you have in Feast for Crows. And the others, the ones who are on another continent, the ones who are north on the wall, their story will be in the next book, which will be A Dance with Dragons. And because of that clever strategy, not only did the Feast for Crows come out, but I have 500 pages of A Dance with Dragons already written. And as soon as I finish all this touring, which is nearing its end now, because this is my last tour. I've already done the UK and I've done the US, so this is the Canadian tour. I don't have a Mexican tour planned, as far as I know, or a South American tour. So I will be chained back to my word processor, and I will be getting back to work as soon as I get home from my travels. And my hope is that A Dance with Dragons will go quickly. I need to do about another 500 pages, and I'm actually fairly pleased with that because, you know, as I struggled to wrap things up with with Feast, I was ending stories in places where, yeah, the ending kind of worked, but it wasn't really the best place that I would have liked to have ended for the book. So I can take things a little further now, and I include things that I would not have been able to include, and I think it will be a better story. And with any luck, I should be able to finish it in the spring or summer, and if I can get this book in at that time, then it may come out before the end of 2006, if not early 2007. But for word on that, you want to watch my website. I publish updates there occasionally. That's www.georgermartin.com. And that's really the best place to find information about my book. Please don't trust anybody else's website, and especially Amazon's. And ignore all the publication dates. And you know, you're welcome to send me emails, although I can't answer them. But I try to answer a few occasionally. But don't send me emails that Amazon has just changed their date again, and why is that, and please explain it to you, because they keep changing their date. I don't know where they get these dates or the page numbers that they announce or things like that, but they generate thousands of emails for me of people saying, Amazon said the book would be out on August 3rd, and now they say it will be out next February. What does this mean? You know, why did you change? You know, and I haven't announced any date. I'm still working on the damn book, trying to get it edited, so my editors will get off my back. But I got all these people announcing dates. So anyway, long digression, but my website is the place for information about my book. So that's why the book is 5 years late. I'm sorry about that. I've never taken so long with a book. I hope I never take so long with a book again. But I do feel that, you know, publication schedules are fine, but that's business, and this is art. I'm trying to make it art anyway. This book has my name on it, and it will be probably the thing that I'm best known for, and I want to make it as good as possible. You know, I'm very flattered by some of the reviews I've gotten, by people comparing me with Tolkien, that whole American Tolkien thing. I certainly want to be worthy of that, and I don't want to rush a book and put it out, and it's not finished, it's not as good as it could be, just in order to meet a deadline, and because my readers are getting antsy because it's been a year or 2 years or 5 years since the last book. I understand why they're getting antsy, but I think it's more important that the book be good than that the book be out on time. If it can be good and out on time, that would be my choice. And believe me, I will do everything I can to achieve that. But ultimately, I will always try to choose the quality of the book. Okay. Thank you. So let's throw it open for questions here, and I'll spend a while asking or answering your queries about the book.
Okay, questions? Anybody?
Okay, so, Storm of Swords with the end and Tywin and everything like that, it actually made a lot of people wonder. Tywin was rather solitary and everything like that. Did he actually, at any given time, would you have put him in the spot where he would have been the whoring kind?
Well, what do you think?
You're the writer.
I am the writer, and I wrote in the book, so you have to look at the evidence in the book and try to make your own conclusions about what the character was or was not capable of. Certain additional revelations about some characters may be made in later books that will give more evidence to some of these dilemmas, but they're not necessarily something that I'm going to reveal from a platform.
So, next one over here.
Hi, George. How you doing?
I'm doing good.
I'm thinking ahead into the future when Home Box Office does the adaptation of the whole series. And I was wondering...
That's a good idea.
Yeah, I know, because I know you like what they did with Rome and with Deadwood.
Bring me back a set of DVDs.
I was thinking, Captain Tyrion. What about Warwick Davis, the guy who did Willow?
This is actually a genuine issue in any visual version of it, because there are not a lot of well-known dwarf actors. Warwick Davis is certainly a possibility, but I think he's too soft. Certainly the role he's played in Willow is you know, he's too soft. Tyrion has more of an edge to him. You know, there might be, there's a movie out called The Station Agent that has a guy in it who might be a possibility. But there's not a lot of choices. Of course, with technology, of course, you can go the Lord of the Rings thing, where you can take a full-size actor and shrink him down digitally, and you don't actually have to cast the dwarf, although I think that might be controversial. The dwarfs may object to that, the way you have the, you know, Memories of the Geisha thing, where they cast Chinese actresses as Japanese women, so I don't know, you always have those political questions in Hollywood. But you are right about the HBO thing. I mean, people have asked me constantly whether this can be made into a film, and I don't think it can be made into a film. Certainly not one film. I mean, there's just too much. How do you fit it all in? Lord of the Rings, the 3 volumes of Lord of the Rings together are the same size as A Storm of Swords, which is only one of the 4 books now out. So if Lord of the Rings took 3 movies, I have 12 movies just in what I've published so far, and there would be more. No Hollywood studio is going to commit to you know, 27 movies. But the way to do it is to do it as a series of television miniseries, like Rome. You know, you do Game of Thrones, 12 hours, not a 2.5-hour movie, 12 hours as a miniseries, and it runs its course, and then you take a year off. The next season you come back and you do 12 more hours for Clash of Kings, etc. That is the way to do it. But so far HBO has not come ringing on my doorbell. My doorbell has been rung. I mean, I have people ask me whether there is interest from Hollywood, and yes, there has been, especially since Feast for Crows hit the bestseller list and the article appeared in Time magazine. Yeah, my agent's phone has been ringing off the hook. But it's been ringing off the hook from people who haven't read it. They just picked up Time, and they read, oh, the American Tolkien. Wait a minute. The other Tolkien, he made a lot of money. Let's take a look at these books. So, you know, they call up my agent and they request a copy of the book. And in most cases, we never hear from them again. They get the book and they vanish into the ether because they say, well, what the hell is this stuff? We can't fit all this into a movie. How are we going to... There's too many characters. There's too many plots. There's a dwarf. So, there you go, you know. The lead, he kills the lead. How could you do so it throws Hollywood for a bit of a loop. But, you know, maybe someday HBO will notice it. That would be great. If the other book come out and continue to hit #1, who knows?
Okay.
Another question?
Let's take one in the back here.
So this is a question about the covers of some of the books, the Voyager ones that were published in the UK. The covers of the first three, Clash of Kings, Game of Thrones, Storm of Swords, they were quite extravagant. They had all this dramatic artwork and stuff. I've got the 2 books with me today. And I'm looking at the Voyager cover for A Feast for Crows, and it looks like the American published books. It doesn't follow the same suit as the first 3 ones, or the first 4, because Storm of Swords was cut in half in the UK. So did your publishers give an answer to any of that? Why they didn't go with the same style of artwork and went for a different loop for this?
Oh, yes, certainly. And exactly the same thing has happened in the United States and in the United Kingdom. So actually the UK did it first, but in each case, you know, you have a dilemma. I mean, the purpose of these covers on books, of course, is to sell the books, to attract people to them. When A Game of Thrones first came out in the United States, it had a silver foil cover with an embossed throne on it. Does anyone here have that cover? Did you bring it with you? No. There it is, yeah. Hold it up high so people can see it. That's the original cover of Game of Thrones. You'll notice that it's very, you know, there's typography, there's an embossed throne behind it. There's no fantasy, there's no castle, there's no guy on a horse, there's no swords. The thought behind that, and it's a publishing thought, it's commercial, was that these books are fantasies that will appeal to people who don't normally read fantasy, who normally walk right by the science fiction section and the fantasy section, but they would like this book. So let's put on a cover that makes it look more like a bestseller, you know, the foil to catch the eye and so forth, and we will get these people who don't normally read fantasy. That was the thought with that book. And I thought it was a great idea because what do I know, #1, and I do agree that these books do appeal to people who don't read fantasy, and that's been confirmed in the years since. I get a lot of emails from people who are hardcore fantasy fans, but I also get emails from people who say, well, I never read fantasy, but, you know, somebody made me read your book, and boy, it's great, I like it, you know, even though I never read any other fantasy. Unfortunately, that cover failed, because the people who don't normally read fantasy may have stopped and picked it up, caught by the bright silvery cover. And then they opened it, and it had maps in it, and it said swords, kings, dragons. So they quickly put it down and ran away. Meanwhile, the people who do like fantasy walked right by it, because it didn't have any castles or dragons on the cover. So at that point, my publisher let out a squeal and said this won't work, and when the paperback came out, it had a traditional fantasy cover. The paperback sold very well. And then with the second book, with Clash of Kings, in America, they devised what they thought was the ideal solution, which was the gold cover, the foil, but also a little box of fantasy art in a small box. And that seemed to be a solution for quite a while. Meanwhile, the British were doing traditional fantasy covers right from the start. And all of these books did quite well after that initial failure with the silver cover, and sold. The series has been building steadily. The first book wasn't on any bestseller list. The second book appeared on the New York Times list once as #13. The third book appeared for 2 weeks, and of course this fourth book, with a different cover treatment, has appeared #1. What's happened now with the fourth book is that both the British and American publishers have decided to go after these non-fantasy readers again. their thought is that, okay, the fantasy readers know about this series now. They will find the book. We don't need to put a dragon on the cover for them to find it. But we still want those other readers. We want the Bernard Cornwell readers. We want the people who won't read a fantasy, and they're not going to buy it if it has a dragon and a castle on a cover. So we got to put these more, understated covers. Like this new one, again, you got the foil, and here you have a bird of some sort, and the British one has a cup on it. So that's the thought behind the change, and the British actually did it first. And by all reports, it's working. We have a lot of new readers who have picked up the book in England, and they've repackaged the whole series, of course. They've also reissued the earlier books. So I think these understated kind of quasi-mainstream covers are likely to remain the cover approach in both the UK and the US, at least for the foreseeable future.
Okay, next question we'll get here on the line. Anybody here?